Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Valero Texas Open. Got to break down what to expect conditions-wise, some of the modeling key stats that I'm using to go out there and identify our top plays, and then afterwards what most of you are here for. Got to talk through some of the top plays out there for this week, both for DFS, large field GPPs, and over there on the betting side for some potential outrights, some top 10s, some top 20s. We have you covered pretty much across the board. So going to go through a few plays towards the top. Those will be our core plays, some value plays towards the mid to lower end of the board, and give you an idea of exactly how I'm attacking this kind of slate. So a lot to get into here. Let's start it off with a look at the golf course and some of my key stats for this Valero Texas Open. TPC San Antonio is the venue of the week, and it's really kind of like the Valspar Championship. So not quite the Bombers Fest that we had over there at the Houston Open. This is much more about precision off the tee, also into the greens, where you have some real difficult around the green shots. And if you're missing far offline off the tee, you have natural areas that come into play, so you'll definitely get penalized there. And then any miss on these about average sized greens are going to lead to a lot of bogeys. There's plenty of undulation at this course. Greens that are, I'd say, average to fast in terms of their speed, and it's a good simulation for what you're going to see at Augusta National. You saw the same thing with the Houston Open. They try and recreate some of the different playing conditions out there for this week that you're going to see for the first major, and it's nice to see that for that 2-week stretch to get these players amped up. So a few stats that I'm looking at to identify my top plays. First off, I'm looking at a lot of wedge players, and it's a golf course that doesn't favor the bomber. In fact, a lot of your scoreable looks are going to come from 150 yards and in, and that 50 to 125 yard range is about twice as important at this golf course as it is in most others out there on tour. So if there's anything that's de-emphasized, it's some of the mid irons. You have a lot of shots that are going to come from 225 to 250, also from 250 plus yards. So a little bit more emphasis out there, but it's not really about that power game. The par 5, some of the par 3s are going to put, something like a hybrid, even 3-wood in hand at time to time. But we're going to go out there and make a majority of your birdies. Where you see a lot of your champions separate themselves are with some of the shorter stuff. So I've seen a few people tout the 250 range as something to look at this week. I don't disagree with that, but a majority of my emphasis out here for the Valero is going to be from the 150 yards and in. Off the tee, this is much more about precision than it is distance. So driving distance, it is still in my modeling, not something that I'm going to completely ignore out there, but I'm much more looking at fairways gained, a little bit at driving accuracy. I would say that fairways gained probably a little bit of a better stat to look at than pure driving accuracy, because if you're just hardly missing fairways, that's not a problem around Valero. It's about a 2-inch rough that they have, which is, a little bit worse than playing out of the fairway, but it's not the worst thing that you can have happen, right? It's pretty dry out there. It's not like a wet, sticky Bermuda grass that at 2 inches can be pretty penal. It's that rye overseed that is much easier to hit out of. And over the years, you've had a few years where the birdie percentage has actually been higher out of the rough than what you've had out of the fairway. So that is obviously a little bit of variance that is going on right there. But what that tells us is that the accuracy, that precision off the tee is much more about keeping it out of the natural areas, right? The cactuses, the, heavily wooded areas where it's pretty much a for sure chip out, than going out there and hitting the short stuff. Around the green is low-key important around TPC San Antonio, as you have some of the more difficult surrounds on tour. A lot of undulation, like I mentioned, the real speedy greens, a lot of slope out there on those green complexes puts a little bit of emphasis on around the green play. So especially when you're looking at top 5, top 10 finishers, you usually see a lot of green out there on the shots gained metrics. And if you look at some of the correlation stuff, at this golf course, a lot of those different data sites out there have around the green as an extremely important stat this week. So, the correlation analysis, right, will bring you to something like a shots gained around the green, but even just leaderboard watching over the last few years, you'll see quite a few guys that are saving par a lot. Putting, you can't ignore, but it is de-emphasized this week, so a little bit less important than what we have in your typical tour event. You have some Poa Tribolus overseeded greens, so you could look at that for a little bit of an edge this week. Par 5 scoring matters when you have a par 72 setup like what we have for this week. Bogey avoidance at a tricky track has been correlated to success, so kind of like shots gained around the green. It's another one of those metrics where if you're just looking at leaderboards, if you're just going out there running some of that correlation stuff, you're going to get pointed to bogey avoidance right away. Distance from center of fairway, another accuracy stat to look at, which I kind of prefer over driving accuracy, right? These fairways gained, which is essentially how much you can still hit the green, right, after hitting a tee shot. So it gives you a good idea of, maybe tee shots that are missing in the right spots. Distance from center of fairway gives us a good idea of who's not going to hit it off the planet. So players like Collin Morikawa, Russell Henley that are not only just hitting fairways, but pretty much hitting the center of the fairway every time they hit the golf ball, are going to get a significant boost in that kind of category. I have some long par threes, so I'm looking at those from 200 to 225. And with our comp courses, I have the Innisbrook Copperhead course. Valspar Championship, I think, is a really good comp for this week. A course that doesn't require distance. It's helpful. Like any golf course we're playing, right? Distance is going to be helpful, but those shorter, more plotter type of players that are good with their wedges show up there. Same thing at this course. WM Phoenix Open is another really tricky track around the green, so I think you get some of that crossover there. And then the Cognizant Classic, similar agronomy. You have the same type of grass, or at least similar grass at all three of these golf courses, and a real difficult bogey avoidance type of golf course. So, kind of leaning into that correlation that we were talking about before. Maybe not the best comps. They're not my favorite, right? I still think they're like, maybe a 7 or an 8 when I would go out there and rate my comp courses, but enough to go out there and throw them for a little bit of my modeling. The end all be all, the summary here for our key stats are that we want wedge players, guys that aren't going to hit the ball off the planet, that are pretty solid around the green. Now, you're usually not going to find, all of these categories checked off. Trivalous putting would also be a nice little boost to go out there and add to that. But if they can check off 3 of those 4 buckets, right? And let's say that they're either a really good par 5 scorer or a pretty solid bogey avoidance player. If they're checking off 4, maybe even 5 of these categories up here, they're going to be a player that I'm really looking at this week. So if there's anything I'm looking at a little bit less, it's that driving distance, it's that putting that I was mentioning before, but it's not like I'm using that and holding it against players that have that skill set. Now talking about our play, so hopping over to the DFS and betting side of things, we're going to start off with Collin Morikawa, who in terms of course fit is really the poster child for this event, and it's a shame that he hasn't played here before. You take a look at the last 5 times we've played over here at this event, he has no course history to speak of. So this is all about the course fit, and it's all about just looking at the stats, right, trying to project how he's going to play around the Valero Texas Open. And as the #1 player on tour when it comes to distance from edge of fairway, as one of the best players when it comes to shots gained approach, particularly from 150 yards and in, it gives me a lot of hope for somebody like a Morikawa here. So if you take a look at his last 12 rounds, the added little bonus for Morikawa, especially when it comes to DFS, is I don't think he's going to be extremely popular. So just over the last 12 measured rounds, he's only gaining 0.1 strokes per round, which is well below his baseline. And I think because of that, he's going to be one of the lower owned, if not the lowest owned player up here in the 10K range. So Hideki will be chalky. People will always play Rory McIlroy. Ludwig has some decent form himself, so I think he'll slightly edge somebody like a Collin Morikawa when it comes to the ownership number there. Max Homa, right, also in some sketchy form, but is playing a little bit better than what we have here with Collin Morikawa. So I don't love the form, right? That is definitely, something that isn't great, right, when you're going out there and playing somebody. But if we zoom out a little bit, go to the last 24 measured rounds, which isn't that much of a change, right? It's, just looking at maybe the last month and a half, 2 months, as opposed to just the last month sample size for Collin Morikawa. He goes back to gaining 0.3 strokes per round. More importantly, right, gaining 0.75 strokes per round when it comes to his shots gained ball striking. Decent around the green, which you come to expect, and losing a little bit with the putter, which is very much so on brand for Collin Morikawa. And you have to remember that this last 24 rounds includes a 12-round sample size of him losing, right, a bunch of strokes on approach, right, him losing, or should I say maybe not gaining as many strokes, right, out there with the off the tee play. So this last 24 round sample size, right, the 12 rounds, right, before this recent stretch of golf were very favorable to Collin Morikawa. In fact, he had events where he was gaining off the tee, gaining 2-3 strokes. With the irons, was one of the best iron players to start the early part of 2024. And with these elite tier players, right, they're going to go into mini slumps like what you've seen for Collin of late, but I'm not going to completely hold that against him. So while I understand why he's maybe slightly lower owned than his counterparts up here in the 10K range, because of the course fit, because of the fact that he is so accurate off the tee. He's really good with the irons that we're looking at this week. Solid bogey avoider. In general, is a top 10 birdie maker this year. So it's not like he's playing poorly. It's just that the last 2 starts have not been amazing, right? T45 at the Players is disappointing for a player of his caliber, right? Missed cut at the API is, of course, going to be disappointing, right? For a player that's expecting to be in contention out there. Because of that, you're getting him at a decent price tag, a much lower ownership number that we're used to seeing, and at an event that he hasn't played at before, I think he has a lot of potential for that top-end finish. So I have not bet him outright. Something I want to note here is that Hard Rock Bet does not have the best outright numbers posted. So what I've done up here, you might see it over here in this header, is the number that I'm looking for an outright, right? The number where I'd start to take somebody like Collin Morikawa to go out there and win would be this number in parentheses. So if you can find something like 28-1, I think he's 30-1 on Bet365. So I would definitely take him out there at that 30 mark. But on Hard Rock Bet, I believe he's 25-1 at this point. So something that I'm holding off on. So I've personally taken him top 10 at plus 325. I believe it was a $50 bet to net something close to $200, a little bit over 200 in terms of its total payout. But a player that in DFS I think is especially going to be valuable because of that low ownership number I'm expecting to see. Speaking of low ownership, our next play we're going to talk through here is going to be Jordan Spieth at $9,500. And again, if you're looking for really solid form, this isn't going to be the play for you. But what we're getting here, what we're almost guaranteeing, and this is a Tuesday, right? We don't even have ownership posted yet or ownership calculated for this week's event yet. At $9,500, we know Jordan Spieth is going to be sub 15% owned, right? You have guys like Corey Connors, who's a multiple-time champion at this event, priced around him. Matt Fitzpatrick coming in with decent form himself. People are still going to play a Max Homa, a Collin Morikawa in lineups, right? Morikawa probably like 15% owned himself. Somebody like Jordan Spieth, I can't see being like 20-25%. So we know we're going to be getting a reasonable ownership number on somebody like Jordan here. And he's somebody who's won this event in the past, right? In fact, his last 3 starts around the Valero, he's gone T35, win, and then T30. Now, those 35th place finishes, right, aren't going to get it done at $9,500. But one thing I've learned about Jordan is this: you play him at events where he's played well in the past. It, RBC Heritage comes to mind, a Pebble Beach Golf Links, right, comes to mind as well. John Deere Classic, a lot of the events where he has those tour wins, you play him at low ownership. He has his tracks, right? He's that kind of course horse that goes out there and performs at his type of golf courses. And when you have around the green is one of the top stats. When you have bogey avoidance is one of the top stats. When we're looking for short irons, right, wedges, right, that's where Jordan Spieth makes all his money with the iron play. You want to play a Jordan Spieth, and the driving accuracy is maybe the one thing that I would be a little bit worried about out here at this golf course. But as long as you're not hitting it off the planet, you're going to get away with that. And Spieth, especially like 2-3 years ago, was dealing with a lot of issues with that driving accuracy. But to start 2024, he's been playing a lot better than the shots gained would tell you. So I'm just going to bring up the last 24 rounds here, and you'll see why. I'm pretty much for sure thinking he's going to be low owned. Off the tee is about a neutral. He's losing nearly half a stroke on approach. The short game is there. It's always going to be there, right, for Jordan Spieth. But these ball striking numbers are extremely misleading. A lot of his negative rounds have come because of water balls. He's had rounds where he shot 6-7 under par and completely thrown away like a 3-4 under par starting round on Thursday. He's gone full Keegan a few times, right, gone from like top 10 to missing the cut in at least 2 events here in 2024. So when you look at the shots gained metrics, when you're modeling, right, a Jordan Spieth this week, it's not going to look that great, right? But what you have to realize is that a player that is giving away all those strokes, right, on just 1 or 2 holes, those are simple mistakes, right? They're just isolated scenarios where normally, right, on a course without a bunch of water, a lot of those really nasty variance rounds that Spieth has had have been on courses with a lot of water, API, right, with that super deep rough. Now that you get him at a golf course that is a little bit more wide open, but you only have water on 3 of the 18 holes, as long as you're not missing it like 40, 50 yards offline, you're not going to have those penalty drops, right? You're going to be able to likely get yourself up towards the green. He's around the green. He should be able to extract himself from a lot of that trouble, and it's why he's had so much success over here in the state of Texas. So Florida was pretty decent for Jordan Spieth last year, not so much here in 2024, and I think because of that, the ownership is going to be super low, right? He was chalky at this event last year, right? People wanted to play, 2 years ago when we played this event, he was really chalky when he finished in like T35. Now we're getting the low-owned Jordan Spieth at a golf course that he's won at before. So I much prefer him for this type of event than when he's going to be chalky and somebody that everyone is playing, because he's extremely variant, right? He's not immune to going out there and missing the cuts. He's not immune to going out there and shooting something like a 78, a 79. But what you also get a lot with Jordan Spieth, and he's definitely not immune, right, to finishing top 10, right, to winning tour events. I mean, we've seen that from Jordan Spieth in the past, and when you get him low owned, when you get him as again a little bit more of a sneaky play, is usually when he goes out there and he has his best stuff. So $9,500, I love the price tag. I think that is extremely fair for a low owned Jordan Spieth. Top 10 number, I got him at plus 250, which was pretty comparable to the rest of the industry with the top 10 number there. And then I did bet him to win at plus 200. So sorry, plus 2,000, not plus 200. That'd be an absolute highway robbery. But yeah, plus 2,000, right? 20 to 1 out there in Jordan Spieth. I know he's at 22 to 1 on a few books. It might even be better than that on a few by the time you're watching this video. Obviously, do your line shopping, find the best number available, but he was the one outright bet, and I was willing to get out there for my exposure. For access to everything you see in these spreadsheets, guys, make sure to check out the Patreon page. As you can see here with this little caption on the page, that's where everything is uncensored. So everything that's blacked out, you'll see on the Patreon version. My ownership modeling for every player, all my projections, player pull for out there for GPPs can all be yours over there on Patreon. So it's a real quick, easy way to go out there, copy and paste projections into your optimizer, right? Use that for your process, and also to get all of your research done. So check it out. Link is down below in the description of the video, where you can get access to all of those tools and all the behind the scenes info that I'm posting out there. Next up, we got Adam Scott. It's $8,500. Somebody I took for a top 10 at plus 500. And the last two events, right, last few out there for Adam Scott have not been what most people are looking for, right? And he's been pretty chalky when he's gone out here and been a little bit of a bust. So T45, that was at the Players, so same thing as Jordan Spieth out there. Missed the cut out there at the API, so, you know, pretty similar track record to what Spieth's doing, right? Missed cut, T30 out there for Jordan Spieth. If you're looking for form over the last 12 measured rounds, you're not going to get that with an Adam Scott. So Adam Scott, you can see here, right, is still gaining about a half a stroke per round, but that elite tier iron play that he had found to start 2024 has kind of fallen off here. And because of that, we're once again going to get somebody at lower ownership than we probably should. And if you just zoom out a little bit, right, again, this is another player where we just double the sample size, right? We go from 12 to 24 rounds, right? Go from the last month to maybe the last month and a half, 2 months. Adam Scott goes from okay, right, half a stroke gains per round, to better than double that. In fact, gaining across all 4 categories, the ball striking returns, and that's despite, you know, the last 12 rounds, which are included in the sample, right, not looking all that good, and then gaining close to half a stroke per round with the putter. And this is why he was chalky, right, the last few weeks. It's why he was chalky when he went out there and bombed a little bit. But now that people are starting to cool on him, right, I'm willing to look at that start to this year as a huge positive, and he's only $8,500, right? The top 10 at plus 500 felt like a lot of value out there for the type of player that he is. And in terms of the course fit, right, I mean, he's a solid putter, which, you know, I don't want to hold that against him, right, but that's always a good asset to have. But most importantly, on this surface, kills it, right? Poetrivolous is one of his best surfaces on tour. He's really good with the wedges that we're looking for this week. Driving accuracy can get a little bit hairy, but he's not the type of player that misses it like 40, 50 yards offline. So I'm not as worried about the driving accuracy numbers as I am, you know, as much the, you know, distance from center of fairway marks out there for Adam Scott. And he's actually been really good this year when it comes to distance of center of fairway. So a player that's much better in that category than he is the driving accuracy metrics, which I think makes him a little bit of a sneaky play at this kind of golf course. So if you could get him at 50 to 1 or more, I actually wouldn't even hate him for an outright bet. I believe on Hard Rock Bet, he was like 40 to 1 or something like that. So I'm holding off for right now until I can get a more competitive number compared to the rest of the industry. But at DFS, I think he'll be something like 15% owned this week, which isn't unowned, right? Especially down here in the 8K range. 15% is actually starting to get a little bit high. But when you have guys like Harris English, Alex Noren, Billy Horschel, who are almost certainly going to get a lot of attention this week. Russell Henley, you could say the same thing about. I think he's going to get quite a bit of ownership. It's not going to get out of hand. And I wouldn't even be that surprised if he came in closer to like maybe 10 to 12% ownership. So I'm cautiously optimistic about Scott this week, especially from the ownership angle. But guys like Jordan Spieth, Colin Morikawa, Adam Scott, if you're taking them in 30-35% of your lineups this week, you're going to have at least double the field with your exposure. So that's what I like about them. They're lower owned, right? They're not completely unowned plays towards the top end of the board. And in terms of course fit, in terms of form, are guys that I think aren't getting as much attention as they should. Now let's talk through some value plays. So going down towards the middle to bottom end of the board, our mid-tier play is going to be Tom Kim at $8,100. And Tom Kim, this is a little bit of a risky play. And if you didn't see the news, right, at the Players Championship, ended up withdrawing, I think, after 8 holes. So we're going to have to keep an eye on his health, right? Make sure that he's actually suiting it up this week. Make sure that he's not going to go out there and withdraw like he did last time around. But because of that, I think he's going to be unowned, right? I mean, I think you're talking about Tom Kim at maybe like 5% ownership this week. The form isn't even great either, right? You go to the last 12 measured rounds, you'll see Tom Kim is losing with the ball striking. He's losing with the putter. How could you ever want to play Ji Young Kim? How could you ever want to play Thomas the Tank Engine Kim? Well, I know that golf's a crazy sport, right? I know that a lot of these talented players, right, will get into, a 3-4 week spell where they just can't get anything done. And the Players Championship, I'll remind you, was, 3 weeks ago at this point? It's been nearly a month, right, since we've had the Players, at least a full 3 weeks that Tom Kim has had time to heal, go out there, recuperate, figure out what the heck is going on. If you're giving me Tom Kim with no ownership this week, if you're giving me Tom Kim, who I know is a baller, multiple-time winner on tour, player that if he's playing well, right, and that's a huge if, right, if we're just kind of lying to ourselves and telling him that he's playing well, right, accurate off the tee, really good with the wedges, and solid around the green, right, does everything we're looking for at this golf course. The event history, let's double check on that. I don't believe has experience. Yeah, no starts out here at this event. It's not like he's played well here, right, and he wants to back up that form that he posted his first 2 seasons. He's just trying to get ready for the Masters. And sure, there is a lot of risk anytime you're playing somebody that is coming in off a withdrawal, but the upside is massive for taking this sort of player, and especially if you're in those large field GBPs. So I am taking him for a top 10 at plus 525. If he doesn't end up playing, right, that gets voided over there in Hard Rock Bet. So that's totally fine, right? If you're going out there and taking him in that market. And if he plays in DFS, I think he's going to be much lower owned than he probably should be. So I like him there at that price tag. The form isn't there. It's a kind of recurring theme, right, with the plays that we're getting to here. But the added side effect of that is that we know they're going to be low owned, right? People have gone to the point here with PGA DFS where they run their projections, they run their sims, they just regurgitate, right, all the touts plays out there and use them in their lineups, where we can kind of just guess on Monday. I mean, at least I can, right? I've been doing this long enough where on Monday I pretty much know who the chalk's going to be. Somebody like Tom Kim is going to be the exact opposite of that. So I would be mind blown if he was 10% or higher owned. In fact, I think he's going to be closer to that 5%, that he is that 10% mark that I'm throwing out there. And at that price tag with that 525 number for the top 10, is I thought, was worth taking. And if he's truly healthy, right, if we get a lot of good reports on him, a 55-1 outright number would be something that I'm looking to get exposure there as well. Next up, we got Lucas Glover at $7,300. So going down into that 7K range now for one of our value plays. I've got him for a top 10 at plus 650 and is a player who has some course history. So if we go down here, show you how he's fared around TPC San Antonio. You see that he's gone 45th last year, kind of shaky for him, but T14, 4th, T14. Before that, has had a lot of success at this course as well at prior iterations of this event, and fits everything we're looking for, right? The form here with Lucas Glover is not a bad thing, right? Like we've had for some of our top plays, right? Off the tee is extremely accurate, right? Not a bomber, which is kind of what we're looking for this week. And then on approach and around the green, which are 2 of my top 3 key stats, stats, right? He's a flusher on approach, we know that, and around the green has been even better, gaining over half a stroke per round. So the putter is never great for Lucas Glover, right? Even on the surface, you can see it's actually a little bit worse than his 24-round baseline. But in a top 10 format where if he goes out there and just manages to be a neutral putter to the field, I could see him going out there and having that top 10 finish and probably being optimal for large field GPPs at this kind of price tag as well. So it's, again, a low percentage sort of hit play, right? You know, his implied top 10 percentage rate isn't all that great, but as long as he's not super chalky for large field GPPs, it's still a player that I think you can get some leverage to, right? He's got the course history we're looking for. He's got the course fit that we're looking for. You zoom in on his form, so just over the last 12 measured rounds, it's still decent. In fact, from tee to green, right, is still gaining about, what is that? About a stroke per round when it comes to shots gained tee to green. And though the putter hasn't been great, it hasn't been atrocious, right? He's only losing about 0.2 strokes per round. On this surface, which is this Poa Trivialis surface, he's had a few events where he's actually been a slight positive with the flat stick. And if we get a slight positive with the flat stick, right, and, you know, his usual tee to green stuff, you know, when he's going out there and gaining a stroke per round, that's that top 10 we're looking for. So I don't think it's that far-fetched. He definitely has to have that putter cooperate to go out there and get that ceiling performance. But in single entries cash contests, that kind of thing, I think he's maybe an even better play for those kind of formats just because of the floor that that ball striking and that tee to green play brings out there at this golf course. So just the prototypical kind of play that we're looking for here. You've seen that with the event history with the Lucas Glover, and he's very similar to our top end plays. Like, you know, Tom Kim is like a younger version of Lucas Glover, right? Somebody like a Colin Morikawa in particular, right? It's just that tee to green flusher that we're looking for. That has translated well with somebody like Lucas Glover, right? It's not as much of a, you know, us taking a guess, right? As much it is with some of the top end players. But if it's worked for Lucas Glover, it can work for somebody like a Colin Morikawa. So that's the idea with some of our exposure. And then for our last play, it is Royal Hisatune out there from Japan, $6,600. Top 20 at plus 375, which I like. I think some value out there with that top 20 number. And ever since this guy started playing on tour, and I'm not just talking this year in 2024, he had a few sporadic starts last year where he made the cut, and I believe all of them, right, had a few top 20s. He played an event like 2-3 years ago. I think it was the CJ Cup, went out there in top 20. Played the Zozo, finished top 10, I believe, out there in like 2019. This guy is just an absolute baller, and you've seen that, right? To start this year, he's been one of the more consistent rookies that we've had on tour, and though his recent form, like if we're just looking at the last few starts, can be a little bit shaky, right? T33 is okay, right? Missed cut, T18, okay, then another missed cut. So he's a little bit volatile. These T18 finishes are borderline optimal for large field GPPs, right? Especially when you're only $6,600. And in particular, what I really like about Hisatune is we go down here to the shots gained metrics. You'll see that he gains on approach and he gains with the around the green, right? Those are two of the most important stats that I'm looking for. And in terms of his driving accuracy, that is the main thing he's known for, right? He's not the longest off the tee. He's actually pretty accurate though when it comes to his distance from center of fairway. And his fairway percentage is pretty, I think, pretty close to the tour average, but his distance from center of fairway is top 25th percentile. So he's another one of those sneaky plays that doesn't hit it too far offline, that especially with the approach and the around the green stats is somebody that I could see popping at this kind of track. And if you take a look at his putting to start 2024, you'll see that this Poa Trivialis overseed has been his best surface to start his career over here. In fact, about a half a stroke better than that 24-round baseline. If we get the solid tee to green play, which he's kind of just shown us, right, all of 2024, and then we get the slightly positive putter out here, that top 20 is extremely reasonable. So he's the kind of play that I think you'll see this top 20 number go down by the time we get to lock, right? It'll probably be like plus 325, plus 300 by the time we get to Thursday, just because of how good of a course fit it is. And he's not a flashy name, right? He's not going to be mega chalky out there for GPPs. Now, I think he'll get some attention because of the price tag, because of how consistent he's been out there on tour so far, but I don't see him getting over like maybe 7% ownership, right? I could see him getting closer to 5% out there in large field GPPs, but even at that number, I'll take my 15%. I'll get well over the field on somebody like Hisatune. and make him one of my real conviction spots down here in the 6K range. So like him there, like him for the top 20, like I mentioned before. And it's this type of player, right? This stat profile where you're gaining with the approach play, you're gaining around the green, that is really helping me make a lot of my plays. And it's not just the 6 that we talked about here, right? There are plenty of other guys that I'll be getting some exposure to this week. And it's just team course fit this week. That's the way that I'm handling this. I think a lot of people, a lot of the chalk is just going to be team recent form, which is almost always the case, right? People are almost always team recent form out there. But at this kind of golf course, that is so much different than what we've had down in Florida. It's so much different than even Houston, right? I know the same state, same agronomy, but one was a bomber's paradise. This could not be any more different. I just feel like the recent form is kind of useless, right? The recent form we're looking at are Florida golf courses with water all over. It's a Houston Open, right? Where it was just a bomber's fest out there. You didn't have to hit the fairway for anything. This week is going to be a whole lot different. So that's why I'm taking more of that game theory approach. So if you're a recent form truther, you probably hated all the plays we went through, but there's a good reason I'm taking that strategy for this kind of week. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the DFS and betting preview. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead, smash that like button for me, and also comment down below who you've got as your winner for this week. If you can get somebody that is 30-1 or more on sportsbooks to go out there and be your winner, go out there and win a free month of my Patreon. So go ahead, comment who you have as the winner. That means, right, you can't take a lot of those top end guys. Anyone that's 30 or 1 to more on most of the sportsbooks, right? And if you're cutting it close with the 30-1, do some research. Right? Make sure you're not taking somebody that's like 25-1. If you can get that, a little bit more of a long shot winner, you'll get a free month of my Patreon page. So go out there, give me your guess down below for a chance to win that free month, and let's go out there and have ourselves a week for this Valero Texas Open. We'll have some prop content dropping a little bit later on, going over how to attack the prize picks and underdog boards out there for round 1's action. We also have our live stream Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, where you can drop any of your questions for this week, go over a last second weather analysis, talk through some game theory ownership heading into the large field GPPs, and get ready to build some of those lineups, some slips out there for Thursday. And again, try and have ourselves a week for this Valero Texas Open. There's also a live golf event this week, which I'll be going to down here in Miami. So probably gonna have some extra content for that, especially on the live streams, which we'll talk about down here for Miami. Gonna be just doing some scouting, right? Trying to take a look at some of the guys heading to Augusta National and try and figure out whether they're worth betting right out there for this first major of the year. So it'll be a busy week, some live golf once again, which I can't complain about. I'm down here as a South Floridian. And like I said, let's go out there and have ourselves a week. Appreciate the support here, guys. Smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys for the content throughout the rest of this golf tournament.